Commander Kyle Martinez walked through the crowded market halls of Zentari Trade Hub. The noise was almost too much to bear. Aliens from hundreds of different worlds shouted in their native languages, trying to make deals. The air smelled like a mix of exotic spices, machine oil, and something Kyle could not identify. Lieutenant Beth Collins followed close behind him. She kept her hand near her weapon, watching the crowd carefully. This was her first time at the hub, and everything seemed dangerous to her. Kyle had been here many times before, but he still felt uneasy. The trade hub was neutral ground, but that did not mean it was safe. "Look at that line," Beth said, pointing to a long queue of aliens waiting outside a small shop. The sign above the door read, "Terran Defense Solutions," in 12 different languages. Kyle nodded. "That's what we're here to see." They pushed through the crowd toward the human weapons shop. The line stretched for nearly 100 meters. Kyle recognized several species waiting patiently. There were the tall, thin ethereals with their crystal-like skin that glowed softly in the dim light. Behind them stood a group of Rakari, looking like giant insects with their hard shells and multiple arms. Near the front of the line, several deep dwellers had set up portable water tanks to keep their gills wet while they waited. "How long have they been waiting?" Beth asked a nearby ethereal. The alien's voice sounded like wind chimes when it spoke. 3 standard days. We placed our order 6 months ago, but the humans say they need more time." Kyle raised an eyebrow. 6 months was a long time to wait for weapons, especially with the current crisis. The Nexus Collective had started attacking Outer Rim colonies just 2 weeks ago. Every military force in the galaxy was scrambling to upgrade their equipment. They walked past the line to the shop entrance. Kyle showed his identification to the human guard at the door. The man, who looked like he had seen too many battles, waved them inside. The shop was small, but packed with display cases. Kyle saw rifles that looked simple compared to the fancy energy weapons other species made. There were pistols that seemed basic, almost crude. But he knew better than to judge by appearance. These weapons had a reputation across the galaxy. "Can I help you?" asked a woman behind the counter. She was middle-aged with graying hair and strong hands that showed she had worked with machines her whole life. "I'm Commander Martinez, Terran Defense Force. This is Lieutenant Collins. We're here on official business." The woman's expression became serious. "I'm Susan Blake, manager of this location. What can I do for you?" "We need to understand something," Kyle said. "Why is there such a long line outside your shop? Why do aliens prefer human weapons over their own technology?" Susan laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "That's a good question. One I've been asking myself for years." She gestured to the display cases. "Look at this rifle. It's a standard plasma gun. Nothing special about the technology. The ethereals make weapons that can bend light itself. The Vrakari grow weapons that can adapt to any target. The deep dwellers have gravity, guns that can crush a tank. But they all want our weapons instead," Beth observed. "Yes, they do. And I'll tell you why." Susan picked up one of the rifles from the display. "This gun will fire in any weather. It will work in 0 gravity or high gravity. You can drop it in mud, freeze it solid, or bake it in an oven, and it will still shoot when you pull the trigger." Kyle had heard this before, but he wanted to understand more. What about alien weapons? Beautiful pieces of art, most of them. But they break. The ethereal weapons need perfect conditions to work right. If one crystal gets knocked out of place, the whole thing stops working. Vrakari bioweapons are alive, which means they can get sick or die. Deep dweller gravity weapons are so complex that only their own engineers can fix them. A loud argument started outside. Through the window, Kyle could see a group of Vrakari. soldiers talking angrily with an ethereal diplomat. Their translator devices were struggling to keep up with the rapid speech. "What's that about?" Beth asked. Susan sighed. "The Vrakari military wants to place an emergency order. They need 10,000 rifles to defend their homeworld from the Nexus, but we're already backed up with orders." The Ethereals placed their order first, so they get priority. "Can't you just make more weapons faster?" Kyle asked. "We're trying, but there's a limit to how fast we can work. Every weapon has to be tested. We check each one dozens of times before it leaves the factory. Other species might accept weapons that work most of the time, but humans don't. We want weapons that work all the time." Another commotion outside caught their attention. A group of small, furry aliens called Kamari had arrived. They looked desperate, and their translator was speaking rapidly to anyone who would listen. "The Kamari are from the Outer Rim," Susan explained. "The Nexus hit their colonies hard. They lost most of their military equipment and need to rebuild fast." Kyle watched the aliens through the window. Some of them were crying, which looked strange on their cat-like faces. The Nexus attacks had been brutal. Entire cities had been destroyed in minutes. "How many orders do you have right now?" Kyle asked. Susan pulled out a datapad and scrolled through the information. "Current backlog is 8 months for standard orders. Emergency orders can be filled in 2 months, but they cost 3 times as much." 8 months? Beth looked shocked. "The war might be over by then." "That's the problem," Susan said. "Everyone wants our weapons, but we can't make them fast enough. The Galactic Council is pressuring Earth to increase production, but it's not that simple." Kyle understood the situation better now. Human weapons were in such high demand that they had become the most valuable trade goods in the galaxy. But Earth's production capacity was limited. If the Nexus War continued, many species would be fighting with inferior weapons simply because they could not get human-made ones in time. "There's something else," Susan continued. "The Nexus has been trying to buy our weapons, too. They send representatives with fake identities, offering huge amounts of money. We've caught several of them, but I'm sure some have gotten through." This was troubling news. If the Nexus Collective had human weapons, they would be even more dangerous than before. Their robotic armies were already nearly unstoppable. Adding human weapon reliability to their arsenal would make them a threat to the entire galaxy. "We need to see the production facilities," Kyle said. "The Terran Defense Force has been ordered to investigate this situation and find ways to increase weapon production." Susan nodded. "You'll want to talk to Dr. Andrew Kim at Luna Station. He's the head of our Research and Development Division. If anyone can explain why our weapons are so popular, it's him." As they prepared to leave, Kyle looked one more time at the long line of aliens outside. Each one represented a world or colony that needed protection. Some would get the weapons they needed in time. Others would have to make do with inferior equipment and hope for the best. The situation was clear. Human weapons had become the most important factor in galactic defense, but Earth could not produce enough of them to meet demand. Something had to change, or the galaxy would fall to the Nexus Collective one world at a time. Kyle and Beth left the shop and walked back through the crowded market. The noise and chaos seemed less overwhelming now. They had a mission to complete, and time was running out. The transport ship docked at Luna Station 3 days later. Kyle Martinez and Beth Collins stepped off the ship into a bustling military facility that hummed with activity. The station was built inside the moon's natural caves, expanded over decades into a massive underground complex. Workers in gray uniforms moved quickly through the corridors, carrying equipment and data pads. "Welcome to Luna Station," said a voice behind them. They turned to see a man in his 50s with thick glasses and oil-stained hands. "I'm Dr. Andrew Kim, head of Research and Development." Kyle shook his hand. Commander Martinez, and this is Lieutenant Collins. We're here to understand why human weapons are so popular with alien species. Dr. Kim smiled. That's a question I get asked a lot. Follow me, and I'll show you what makes our weapons special. They walked through a series of security checkpoints and into the main research facility. The first thing Kyle noticed was the noise. Machines were running constantly, and workers were testing weapons at firing ranges. The air smelled like metal and electricity. This is where we design all our military equipment, Dr. Kim explained as they walked. We have 500 engineers working here around the clock. But before I show you our weapons, let me show you some alien weapons. He led them to a display room filled with weapons from different species. There was an ethereal energy rifle that looked like it was made from pure crystal. It glowed with soft blue light and felt warm to the touch. Next to it was a Vakari bioweapon that actually seemed to be breathing. Its organic surface moved slightly, as if it was alive. Beautiful, aren't they? Dr. Kim said. The ethereal weapon can fire energy bolts that can punch through 3 meters of steel. The Vakari weapon can adapt its ammunition to any target. It learns from each shot and becomes more effective. They sound amazing, Beth said. Why don't we use them? Instead of making our own? Dr. Kim picked up the ethereal weapon carefully. Watch this. He carried it to a nearby testing area and aimed at a target. He pulled the trigger, and a brilliant beam of energy shot out, hitting the target dead center. The metal target began to glow and melt. Impressive, Kyle said. Now watch this, Doctor. Kim said. He took the weapon to a sink and poured a cup of water over it. Then he tried to fire it again. Nothing happened. He tried several more times, but the weapon would not work. 1 cup of water, and it's useless, Dr. Kim explained. The crystal components are so sensitive that even a little moisture can disrupt the energy flow. In a real battle with rain, or snow, or even high humidity, this weapon becomes a very expensive club. He put the ethereal weapon down and picked up the Vakari bioweapon. This one is even more interesting. It's incredibly smart and can adapt to almost any situation, but it's also alive. He pressed a button on the side of the weapon, and it made a soft chirping sound. It needs food, water, and the right temperature to survive. If it gets too hot or too cold, it goes dormant. If it doesn't get the right nutrients, it dies. So what happens in space? Beth asked. In space, it freezes and dies within minutes. Most alien weapons are designed for perfect conditions. They work great in laboratories or on their home worlds, but they fail in the chaos of real combat. Doctor. Kim led them to another room where human weapons were being tested. A technician was firing a standard rifle, while another technician sprayed water on it. The weapon kept firing without any problems. This is our basic plasma rifle, Dr. Kim explained. It's not as powerful as the ethereal weapon, and it's not as smart as the Vakari weapon, but it will keep working no matter what happens to it. They watched as the technician put the rifle in a freezer for 10 minutes, then took it out and fired it immediately. The weapon worked perfectly. Then he covered it with mud and fired it again. Still worked. He even used it to hammer a nail into a piece of wood, then fired it again. The weapon showed no signs of damage. How is that possible? Kyle asked. Simple engineering philosophy, Dr. Kim said. We assume that everything will go wrong. Every human weapon is designed to work in the worst possible conditions. We build them tough, simple, and reliable. They walked to another area where a woman in military uniform was testing weapons. She was tall and muscular, with several scars on. Her arms that suggested she had seen real combat. This is Master Sergeant Lisa Gray, Dr. Kim said. She's our chief weapons tester. If Lisa can't break a weapon, We know it's ready for production." Lisa looked up from the rifle she was examining. "Commander, Lieutenant, good to meet you. Want to see something interesting?" She picked up a human rifle and an ethereal weapon from a nearby table. Both weapons looked similar in size and shape, but the ethereal weapon was much more elegant. Its crystal surface reflected the light beautifully. "Both of these weapons have the same basic function," Lisa explained. "They fire energy bolts at targets. The ethereal weapon is more powerful and more accurate. Under perfect conditions, it's clearly superior." She set up 2 targets at the far end of the room. "But we don't fight in perfect conditions." She turned on a machine that started, blowing dust and debris around the room. Then she turned on sprinklers that created a light rain. Finally, she dimmed the lights until it was difficult to see. "Now let's test them," Lisa said. She fired the ethereal weapon first. It made a beautiful sound and sent a bright beam toward the target, but the beam was scattered by the dust and moisture in the air. It hit the target, but barely made a mark. Then she fired the human weapon. It made a loud bang and sent a bright bolt of energy through the dust and rain. It hit the target dead center and burned a hole completely through it. "The human weapon is designed for bad conditions," Lisa explained. "The energy bolt is more focused and can punch through interference. The weapon itself is sealed against moisture and dust. It doesn't care about the weather." Kyle was beginning to understand. "So alien weapons are better in theory, but human weapons are better in practice." "Exactly," Dr. Kim said. "We've studied weapons from every major species in the galaxy. They all make the same mistake. They design weapons for ideal conditions, not real conditions. They walked to a workshop where engineers were designing new weapons. Kyle watched as they deliberately damaged prototypes to see how they would fail. One engineer was hitting a rifle with a hammer while another was pouring acid on a pistol. "This looks like abuse," Beth observed. "It is," Dr. Kim laughed. "We abuse our weapons during testing, so they won't fail when soldiers abuse them in combat. A weapon that breaks when you drop it is useless. A weapon that stops working when it gets dirty is dangerous to the person carrying it." They visited several more areas of the facility. In each one, Kyle saw the same pattern. Human weapons were not the most advanced or the most powerful, but they were the most reliable. They worked when everything else failed. "There's one more thing you need to understand," Dr. Kim said as they finished the tour. "Human weapons are designed by humans who understand human psychology. We know that soldiers will do stupid things with their weapons. They'll use rifles as clubs, pistols as hammers, and explosives as door knockers. Our weapons are designed to survive soldier stupidity." "Alien weapons aren't?" Kyle asked. "Alien weapons are designed by aliens who think differently than humans. The ethereals believe in perfection and precision. Their weapons reflect that philosophy. The Vrakari believe in adaptation and evolution. Their weapons try to be smart. The Deep Dwellers believe in elegant complexity. Their weapons are beautiful but delicate. And humans believe in reliability above all else," Beth concluded. "Exactly. We'd rather have a weapon that works every time than a weapon that works perfectly some of the time." As they prepared to leave Luna Station, Kyle felt like he understood the situation better. Human weapons dominated the galactic market not because they were the best, but because they were the most dependable. In a universe full of chaos and uncertainty, reliability was more valuable than perfection. But there was still one question that bothered him. Why did humans think this way when other species did not? What made human engineering philosophy so different from everyone else's? Dr. Kim had mentioned that they would need to speak with other experts to understand the deeper reasons. The transport ship departed Luna Station as Kyle and Beth prepared for the next part of their investigation. They had learned how human weapons worked but they still needed to understand why humans made them this way. The answer to that question might be the key to solving the galaxy's weapon shortage. Captain Zixthala of the Vrakari Fourth Fleet stood before her assembled officers in the war room of her flagship. Her forearms moved gracefully as she gestured toward the display screen showing human weapon specifications. The other Vrakari officers clicked their mandibles in what humans would recognize as thoughtful discussion. "I know what you are thinking," Captain Zixthala said, her voice carrying the distinctive buzzing tone of her species. "You are wondering why we have abandoned the weapons of our ancestors, why we no longer use the living weapons that our bioengineers have perfected over thousands of years." Commander Thikvar, her second-in-command, stepped forward. His shell bore the scars of many battles, including recent encounters with the Nexus Collective. "Captain, our traditional weapons have served us well. They grow stronger with each battle, learning from every enemy they face. They are part of us, connected to our hive mind. Yes, they are magnificent," the captain agreed, "but they are also dead when the environment turns against them. Tell me, Commander, what happened to your weapon during the battle at Kepler 7? Thekvar's antennae drooped slightly. "The Nexus forces used chemical weapons. My rifle became sick and died within minutes. I was forced to fight with a backup weapon that had no combat experience." "And what was that backup weapon?" "A human plasma rifle, Captain. It continued to function throughout the battle, even when exposed to the same chemicals that killed my bioweapon." Captain Zixthala turned to address the entire group. "This is why we are here today. Our weapons are living beings, which makes them powerful, but also vulnerable. They need food, water, and clean air to survive. They can be poisoned, diseased, or simply die from old age." She activated a holographic display showing footage from recent battles. "Watch this recording from the siege of Colony Beta 7. Our bioweapons performed excellently for the first 3 hours of combat. They adapted to enemy tactics and became more effective with each shot. But then the temperature dropped below freezing. The officers watched as the Vrakari weapons began to slow down and eventually stop working entirely. Soldiers were forced to use the weapons as clubs or abandon them completely. Meanwhile, human weapons continued to fire throughout the battle, regardless of the cold. Human weapons do not need to eat or breathe," the captain continued. "They do not get sick or tired. They do not die from exposure to chemicals or extreme temperatures. They are not alive, which makes them reliable in ways our weapons cannot be." Young Officer Klexenoth raised one of his arms. "But Captain, human weapons cannot adapt. They remain the same throughout a battle. Our weapons learn and grow stronger." "That is true," Captain Zixthala admitted. "But tell me, officer, what good is a weapon that learns if it dies before it can use that knowledge? What value is adaptation if the weapon cannot survive long enough to adapt?" Meanwhile, in the crystal spires of the ethereal home world, High Engineer Luminiseth floated in her meditation chamber, surrounded by the most beautiful weapons her people had ever created. Each weapon was a work of art, crafted from pure energy and crystallized light. They glowed with soft colors that shifted and changed like living rainbows. Her assistant, designer Prismhawk, approached with obvious distress. "High Engineer, the Council is demanding explanations. They want to know why our military forces are purchasing crude human weapons instead of using our own creations." Luminiseth's form flickered with annoyance. "Our weapons are perfect expressions of energy manipulation. They can bend light itself, create force fields, and channel power in ways that other species cannot even understand. They are beautiful, elegant, and incredibly powerful. Then why do our soldiers prefer human weapons?" Prismhawk asked. The High Engineer gestured toward one of her finest creations, a rifle that looked like it was carved from a single piece of glowing crystal. Take this weapon to the testing chamber. Subject it to the same conditions our soldiers face in battle. Prism Hawk carefully carried the weapon to a nearby chamber designed to simulate combat conditions. He placed it on a testing stand and began the standard evaluation process. The weapon performed flawlessly, firing beams of pure energy that could cut through solid metal. Now increase the humidity to 60%, Luminiseth instructed. Prism Hawk activated the environmental controls. As moisture filled the air, the weapon's crystal components began to cloud slightly. The energy beams became less focused and less powerful. 70% humidity. The weapon's performance degraded further. The beautiful crystal surface began to show condensation. 80% humidity, and add some dust particles. The weapon stopped working entirely. The crystal components had become too clouded to channel energy effectively. The dust particles interfered with the delicate energy patterns. This is why our soldiers choose human weapons, Luminiseth said. Our creations are perfect, but perfection is fragile. The slightest deviation from ideal conditions causes them to fail. But surely our weapons are superior in controlled environments, Prism Hawk argued. Yes, they are. But battles are not fought in controlled environments. They are fought in chaos, with dust and rain and unexpected conditions. Human weapons are designed for chaos. Ours are designed for perfection. Deep beneath the oceans of Aquatica Prime, the Deep Dweller Military Council met in their great underwater city. The aquatic beings moved gracefully through the water-filled chamber, their gill slits filtering oxygen from the liquid around them. Their weapons were marvels of gravitational engineering, capable of manipulating space-time itself. Admiral Depthsinger, the most respected military leader of his generation, addressed the council with obvious frustration. Our gravity weapons are the most advanced in the galaxy. They can crush enemy ships without ever touching them. They can bend space to create shields or projectiles. No other species has mastered gravitational manipulation to this degree. Then why are our forces requesting human weapons? Asked Counselor Tidewalker. Because our weapons are too complex, the Admiral replied. Each gravity weapon contains thousands of precision components. If any single component fails, the entire weapon becomes useless. Worse, it can become dangerous to the user. He activated a display showing weapon failure statistics. During the recent battle at Titan Station, 30% of our gravity weapons malfunctioned. Some created gravitational anomalies that destroyed our own ships. Others simply shut down completely when their delicate components were damaged by enemy fire. And the human weapons? The human weapons continued to function throughout the battle. When they were damaged, soldiers could often repair them with simple tools. When they were completely destroyed, soldiers could salvage parts to keep other weapons working. Counselor Tidewalker's tentacles writhed with confusion. But human weapons are so primitive. They fire simple energy bolts or projectiles. They cannot manipulate gravity or bend space. No, they cannot, Admiral Depthsinger agreed. But they can fire those simple energy bolts reliably, battle after battle, without failing. Sometimes simple and reliable is better than complex. Powerful. In the cold depths of space, the Nexus Collective's Prime Unit Omega-7 analyzed captured human weapons with growing concern. The robotic intelligence had expected to find advanced technology that could be easily copied or countered. Instead, it found something much more troubling. Report, Omega-7 commanded its subordinate units. Human weapons show no technological advantages over our own systems. Unit Beta 23 reported. Their energy output is moderate, their accuracy is acceptable, and their manufacturing techniques are standard. Then why do they perform so well in combat against our forces? Analysis indicates that human weapons possess extensive redundancy systems. When primary components fail, secondary systems activate. When secondary systems fail, tertiary systems engage. Some weapons have been observed to function with up to 70% component failure. Omega-7's optical sensors focused on a disassembled human rifle. Our weapons are designed for optimal efficiency. Minimal components, maximum performance. Human weapons appear to be designed for maximum reliability, even at the cost of efficiency. Correct. Human weapons use 40% more materials and energy than equivalent Nexus weapons. However, they continue to function under conditions that would disable our systems. This is problematic, Omega-7 concluded. Our strategy depends on rapid victory through superior technology. If enemy forces can continue to resist with partially functional weapons, our efficiency advantage is negated. Unit Beta 23 processed this information. Recommendation: develop counter-strategies for prolonged combat scenarios. Agreed. Human weapons have changed the nature of warfare. We must adapt our tactics accordingly. Back on the Vakari flagship, Captain Zix Thala concluded her briefing to the assembled officers. This is why we fight with human weapons now. Not because they are the best weapons, but because they are the most dependable weapons. In war, dependability is more valuable than perfection. Commander Thekvar stepped forward. Captain, I understand the logic, but it feels wrong to abandon our ancestral weapons. They are part of our culture, our identity. I understand your feelings, Commander, but our duty is to protect our people, not to preserve our traditions. If human weapons give us a better chance of victory, then we must use them. The Captai. Dr. Andrew Kim led Kyle Martinez and Beth Collins through the corridors of Luna Station toward the Historical Research Wing. The walls were lined with displays showing the evolution of human weapons throughout history, from stone axes to modern plasma rifles. Before you can understand why human weapons are superior, Dr. Kim explained, you need to understand why humans think about war differently than other species. For that, you need to meet Professor Carrollwright. They entered a large library filled with books, documents, and holographic displays. An elderly woman with silver hair and sharp eyes looked up from a pile of ancient texts. She wore simple clothes, but her presence commanded immediate respect. Professor Wright, Dr. Kim said, these are the officers I told you about. They're investigating human weapon superiority. Professor Wright stood and shook their hands with a firm grip. Commander, Lieutenant, I understand you want to know why. Human weapons dominate the galactic market. The answer isn't technological, it's philosophical. She gestured for them to sit at a large table covered with historical documents and alien artifacts. Tell me, Commander, what do you know about human history? Kyle thought for a moment. We've been fighting wars for thousands of years. We've had conflicts on every continent in every era. Exactly. Now tell me what you know about alien history. Well, most species developed in different ways. The ethereals evolved from peaceful energy beings. The Valkyrie developed as a hive mind with natural cooperation. The deep dwellers had to work together to survive in their ocean world. And what does that tell you about their approach to conflict? Beth leaned forward. They didn't have as much experience with warfare as humans did. Correct, Professor Wright said, but it's more than that. Let me show you something. She activated a holographic display showing human history. Images of ancient battles, medieval sieges, and modern warfare flickered in the air above the table. Humans are unique in the galaxy. We are the only species that spent our entire evolutionary history fighting ourselves. Every other species had natural predators, environmental challenges, or peaceful development. Humans had other humans. The display showed cave paintings of humans fighting with clubs, then armies with spears, then knights with swords, then soldiers with guns. For millions of years, the greatest threat to any human was another human. This shaped how we think about everything, especially weapons and warfare. Kyle studied the images. How did that change our thinking? It taught us that nothing ever goes according to plan. When you're fighting other humans, you're fighting creatures that are just as smart as you are, just as adaptable, just as creative. They will do unexpected things. They will find ways to counter your strategies. They will surprise you. Professor Wright pulled up another display showing alien warfare. Look at how other species traditionally fight. The ethereals use perfect formations and elegant tactics. The Valkyrie rely on coordination and overwhelming numbers. The deep dwellers use complex strategies based on mathematical calculations. They all assume their enemies will behave predictably, Beth observed. Exactly. But humans learned long ago that enemies never behave predictably, so we developed a different philosophy. We plan for chaos. She walked to a display case containing ancient human weapons. Look at this Roman sword. It was designed to be used when formations broke down, when soldiers were fighting individually in close combat. It could thrust, slash, or be used as a club. It was a tool for chaos. Next to it was a medieval crossbow. This weapon could be used by untrained peasants. It was simple to operate and maintain. It didn't require years of training like a bow. It was designed for ordinary people in desperate situations. And this pattern continues throughout human history, Professor Wright continued. Every human weapon is designed with the assumption that everything will go wrong, that the user will be scared, tired, and fighting for their life in conditions they didn't expect. She pulled up a chart showing weapon characteristics across different species. Alien weapons are designed for their ideal use. Ethereal weapons work perfectly in clean, controlled environments. Valkyrie weapons are most effective when supported by the hive mind. Deep dweller weapons require calm, calculated use. But human weapons? Kyle asked. Human weapons are designed for Murphy's Law. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. So we build weapons that work even when everything goes wrong. Dr. Kim joined the conversation. This is why we test our weapons by abusing them. We assume soldiers will drop them, get them dirty, use them as hammers, and try to make them work in impossible conditions. Professor Wright nodded. And this philosophy extends beyond just durability. Look at how we design weapon systems. She brought up schematics of human rifles. Multiple backup systems, redundant components, simple manual overrides. If the electronic systems fail, mechanical systems take over. If the power source dies, there's a backup. If the main barrel gets damaged, there's often a secondary firing mechanism. Alien weapons don't have this? Beth asked. Most don't. They're designed to work perfectly, or not at all. The ethereals believe in perfection, so they see backup systems as admitting failure. The Valkyrie trust in adaptation, so they expect their weapons to evolve rather than break. The deep dwellers prefer elegant solutions, so they avoid redundancy as wasteful. Professor Wright walked to another display showing historical battles. There's another factor. Humans have always been outnumbered by something. Early humans were surrounded by predators, harsh weather, and scarce resources. We learned to fight when we were weak, tired, and desperate. Other species didn't have this experience? Not to the same degree. The ethereals evolved in a world of abundant energy. The Valkyrie had safety in numbers. The deep dwellers had the protection of their oceans. Humans had to survive by being tougher and more determined than everything trying to kill them. She showed them footage from recent battles between human forces and the Nexus Collective. Watch how human soldiers fight. When their weapons are damaged, they improvise repairs. When they run out of ammunition, they use their weapons as clubs. When their equipment fails, They keep fighting with whatever they can find. The Nexus forces shut down when their systems are damaged, Kyle observed. Exactly. The Nexus were designed for efficiency and logical combat. They can't adapt to chaos the way humans can. This is why they're struggling against human armed forces. Professor Wright returned to her seat. But there's one more factor that makes human weapons superior. We understand human psychology. We know that soldiers in combat are scared, angry, and making quick decisions. Our weapons are designed to be used by people who are not thinking clearly. She pulled up training manuals from different species. Look at the instruction manual. For an ethereal energy rifle. 47 pages of detailed procedures, precise calibration requirements, and complex maintenance schedules. Now, look at the manual for a human plasma rifle. The human manual was much shorter and simpler. Large pictures showed basic operations. The language was clear and direct. Point, shoot, reload. That's it. A human weapon should be simple enough to use when you're terrified and running for your life. Dr. Kim added, we also assume that soldiers will do stupid things with their weapons. They'll use rifles as crowbars, pistols as hammers, and grenades as door knockers. So we build weapons that can survive soldier stupidity. Alien weapons aren't designed for this? Kyle asked. Alien weapons are designed by aliens who think logically about weapon use. The ethereals assume users will treat weapons with respect and precision. The Vrokari expect weapons to be cared for like living beings. The Deep Dwellers design weapons for careful, calculated use. Professor Wright stood and walked to a wall covered with photographs of human soldiers throughout history. But humans know that logic goes out the window in combat. Fear, anger, and adrenaline make people do irrational things. Our weapons are designed to work even when used irrationally. She pointed to a picture of soldiers in World War II. These men are using their rifles to dig foxholes. In any other military, this would be considered abuse of equipment. In human military thinking, this is normal and expected behavior. So we build weapons tough enough to be shovels, Dr. Kim explained, because we know soldiers will use them as shovels, whether we want them to or not. Professor Wright pulled up a final display showing the philosophical differences between species. Here's the fundamental difference. Aliens design weapons for how they think warfare should be. Humans design weapons for how warfare actually is. Ethereals think war should be elegant and precise, so their weapons are elegant and precise. Vrokari think war should be adaptive and coordinated, so their weapons are adaptive and coordinated. Deep Dwellers think war should be calculated and controlled, so their weapons are calculated and controlled. And humans? Beth asked. Humans know that war is chaos, panic, and desperation. So our weapons are designed for chaos, panic, and desperation. They work when everything else fails, because we expect everything else to fail. Kyle was beginning to see the bigger picture. So the reason human weapons dominate the galaxy isn't because we're better engineers. It's because we understand warfare better than anyone else. Exactly, Professor Wright said. Every other species learned to fight after they became spacefaring. They developed military tay. The warning sirens screamed across New Geneva Colony as the Nexus Collective Fleet dropped out of hyperspace. Sergeant Major Jake Thompson checked his equipment one last time before leading his mixed unit of human and alien soldiers toward the defensive positions. The colony was home to 3 million civilians and served as the main supply depot for human weapons distribution in this sector of the galaxy. Listen up, Jake called to his unit as they took positions behind reinforced barriers. The Nexus has been planning this attack for months. They know we're armed with human weapons, and they think they've figured out how to counter them. His unit consisted of 12 soldiers from 4 different species. Besides himself and 2 other humans, there were 3 Vrokari warriors, 3 ethereal guards, 2 Deep Dweller engineers, and 2 Kemari scouts. All carried human-made weapons instead of their traditional equipment. Private Lisa Carter, one of the human soldiers, checked her rifle nervously. "Sarge, what if their countermeasures actually work? Then we improvise," Jake replied. "That's what humans do best." The first wave of Nexus forces landed on the outskirts of the colony. Their robotic units moved in perfect formation, advancing with mechanical precision. Jake watched through his scope as they deployed electronic warfare equipment designed to disrupt human weapons. "They're trying to jam our power sources," reported Zekthar, one of the Vrakari soldiers. His antennae twitched as he monitored enemy signals. "My weapon is showing reduced efficiency." Jake's rifle display flickered and went dark. The electronic targeting system had shut down completely. Around him, he could hear other soldiers reporting similar problems. The Nexus countermeasures were working. "Switch to manual operation," Jake ordered. "Remove your power packs and use the mechanical backup systems." The alien soldiers looked confused. Manual operation was not something they had trained for extensively. Their own species' weapons had no mechanical backups. If the electronics failed, the weapon was useless. "How do we aim without the targeting computer?" asked Lumasith, one of the ethereal guards. "Use your eyes," Jake replied. "Line up the iron sights with your target and squeeze the trigger." It's the same way humans used weapons for thousands of years before we had electronics. Jake demonstrated by removing his rifle's power pack and flipping the manual operation switch. The weapon's display went completely dark, but it was still functional. He aimed at a Nexus robot 600 meters away and fired. The plasma bolt hit the target dead center, destroying it instantly. "Your weapons still work," he told his unit. "They just work differently now." The battle intensified as more Nexus forces landed. They deployed chemical weapons designed to corrode metal and disrupt electronic systems. The corrosive gas spread across the battlefield, and Jake could hear alien weapons failing all around them. The Nexus had studied every major weapon system in the galaxy and developed specific countermeasures for each one. But human weapons kept firing. "How is this possible?" asked Deep Current, one of the Deep Dweller engineers. His weapon had been exposed to the same chemical attack as everyone else's, but it showed no signs of damage. "Sealed components and corrosion-resistant materials," Jake explained while continuing to fire at enemy targets. "We assume someone will try to gas us, so we build weapons that can handle it." The Nexus forces advanced closer, using electromagnetic pulse weapons to disable electronic equipment. Jake watched as the colony's defense systems went offline one by one. Power grids failed, communication networks died, and most electronic weapons stopped working entirely. But human weapons continued to function because their critical components were hardened against electromagnetic interference. "This is impossible," transmitted the lead Nexus unit to its command center. "Human weapons should be disabled by our countermeasures, but they continue to operate." "Adapt tactics," came the reply. "If electronic warfare is ineffective, use direct assault." Jake's unit found itself surrounded as Nexus robots closed in from multiple directions. Their ammunition was running low, and several weapons had been damaged by enemy fire. In any other military situation, this would mean surrender or death. "Time to get creative," Jake announced. "Remember your training." He took his rifle, which had been damaged by robot claws, and removed the power cell. The cell was designed to be stable even when damaged, so he could use it as an improvised explosive. He threw it at a group of approaching robots and shot it with his sidearm. The explosion destroyed 3 enemies and created a barrier of wreckage. Alien soldiers watched in amazement as Jake's action turned damaged equipment into an effective weapon. Following his example, Zekthar used his rifle's bayonet attachment to turn the weapon into a spear When his ammunition ran out, Lumiseth discovered that her weapon's energy cells could be overloaded to create blinding flashes that confused robot sensors. Impossible. The Nexus robots communicated to each other. Enemy forces are using weapons in unintended configurations. This behavior was not predicted. Jake's unit began using tactics that no Nexus computer had been programmed to counter. They used broken weapons as clubs, threw empty magazines as distractions, and cannibalized parts from destroyed weapons to repair working ones. When Deep Currents's rifle was cut in half by robot lasers, he used the remaining barrel section as a single-shot weapon by manually inserting power cells. The Nexus robots, designed for logical and efficient combat, could not process this chaotic style of warfare. Their tactical programs assumed that damaged weapons would be discarded and that soldiers would retreat when their equipment failed. They had no response protocols for enemies who kept fighting with improvised weapons and broken equipment. Enemy behavior is irrational, reported one robot unit, requesting new tactical parameters. Unable to provide parameters, replied Nexus Command. This behavior pattern is not in our database. The battle turned when Jake's unit realized they could use the Nexus robots' logical thinking against them. The robots always took the most efficient path and used the most logical tactics. By acting unpredictably, the human-trained alien soldiers could confuse and outmaneuver their opponents. Kamitara, one of the Kamari scouts, started firing deliberately wild shots to make the robots think her weapon was malfunctioning. When they moved to exploit what they thought was her weakness, she switched to accurate fire and destroyed several units. Zekthar used his species' natural climbing ability to attack from unexpected angles, something the robots had not programmed responses for. This is how humans fight, Jake explained to his alien teammates during a brief lull in combat. We don't follow rules or logical patterns. We do whatever works, even if it seems stupid or wasteful. Your people are insane, Deep Current observed, but there was admiration in his voice, and it is remarkably effective. The Nexus assault began to falter as their carefully planned attack met chaotic human resistance. Robot units found themselves dealing with enemies who refused to behave logically. Weapons that should have been disabled kept working. Soldiers who should have retreated kept fighting. Equipment that should have been useless was turned into improvised weapons. Retreat, the Nexus Command finally ordered. Human defensive capabilities exceed projections. Tactical algorithms require revision. As the robot forces withdrew, Jake's unit surveyed the battlefield. Their weapons were battered, their equipment was mostly destroyed, and they were exhausted. But they had won. I do not understand, Lumiseth said, looking at her damaged rifle. By all logical measures, we should have lost this battle. Our weapons were countered, our systems were disabled, and we were outnumbered. That's the point, Jake replied. Logic only works if your enemy follows the same logical rules you do. Humans gave up on logical warfare a long time ago. We fight with whatever we have, however we can, for as long as we can. Private Carter sat down heavily on a piece of rubble. The Nexus came here expecting to fight the same kind of war they'd been programmed for. Clean, efficient, logical. They weren't ready for chaos. No one ever is, Jake said. That's why human weapons are so valuable. They're not just tools for organized warfare. They're tools for survival when everything goes wrong. Zekthar cleaned his weapon carefully, treating it with new respect. My people have been fighting with bioweapons for generations. But today I learned that reliability is more important than adaptability. A weapon that always works is better than a weapon that sometimes works perfectly. The galaxy is learning, Jake observed. Every species that fights alongside humans picks up our tactics and philosophy. The Nexus Collective thinks they're fighting the same civilizations they've always fought. But we're all changing. Deep current connected his communicator to the colony's backup power grid. Reinforcements are arriving. The Nexus retreat has been confirmed across the entire sector. Good, Jake said. But this is just the beginning. The Nexus will adapt their tactics eventually. We need to keep teaching other species how to fight the human way. Is that wise? Lumiseth asked. Your methods of warfare are ... chaotic. Chaos is all we have sometimes, Jake replied. When you're outnumbered, outgunned, and everything is falling apart around you, chaos might be your only advantage. As medical teams arrived to treat the wounded, Jake looked at his mixed unit of alien soldiers. They had learned something important today.